we'll see. Setting up. All right. It says we're streaming, so, maybe people get to see this right now,
Maybe we are.
You never know. Hey guys, we're streaming in a new way. So if we act just a little weird, oh, there we are. We are working. In fact, we are working. I can verify that. That's great. So we're coming at you on Facebook and on YouTube and on Restream and all sorts of other things for our Tuesday check-in. Amy, I got to admit, I'm a little tired. Are you a little bit tired?
Yes, I am. I am very tired today.
Have you had coffee? I've had my version of coffee, which is Mountain Dew, which is
the coffee of champions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
We are coffee drinkers. So I have had my coffee.
I wish I was. I think it's like a much more effective caffeine delivery method.
Mm-hmm. But now I'm like 1 cup a day. It's not like all the day long.
Yeah. I get that. I'm super sensitive to it, man. If I've ever had one of these things like, oh, I'm tired, I'm gonna drink a coffee, and then I'll go drink like a small Dunkin' coffee or something, I am wired and cannot handle it. Yeah. Well, we just want to check in with you, everybody here in the Hillsborough community. This is our Tuesday, Thursday check-in, tell you about some things that are coming up, also check in with you and just see what we can do to help you out, answer some questions, anything like that. And so we actually will be taking questions. We had a couple people suggest some questions in advance. So if you got questions for us as you're joining us here in this live stream, throw them down there in the chat section and we will do our best to answer them, unless you just ask us a humdinger and then we're going to go, we're going to have to get back with you on that one. which is a real possibility.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yep. Amy, you got any questions for me? Any just life pondering questions?
I do. I'm wondering how Boomerang, your cat, is doing today.
Oh, man,
is he sleeping? Is he running?
He is presently just wiped out of sleep. I'm going to see if I can turn the computer around to see this. It is a. Do you see him there? Is he there?
Yeah. He also looks there like he might be studying, like he's just taking a nap.
Yeah. That's his notes. He's got the bar exam here in a couple weeks, and he's kind of worried about it. So, it's the cat bar exam, but it's still good. If I was thinking more quickly on my feed, I would have said he was studying for the MCAT, but so didn't.
I mean, cat people, because
cat people.
We also have a cat. Her name's Penelope. She's not up here right now. But my family and I were kind of imagining what kind of store she would open up if she was going to open up a cat store and what she would sell.
Did you come to a conclusion? Is there a consensus among the Dillon family?
Well, she wears a little bow on her collar, so we feel like she would be like couture kind of collars and
you got a fancy
sweaters.
Yeah. I don't know what ours would do. Like some sort of, I don't know. I think of him like a spy, because he, although he's terrible at it, he's a very big cat, so he's not sneaky. And we did this thing where we walk down the stairs, and we have one of these stairwells that goes like 3/4 of the way down and takes a hard right turn. And so there's a little landing. And when he hears us walking down the stairs, he runs on that landing and tries to slide under the first step, like we can't see him. And it's like, you can't get under the step. It's like, we can see a dum-dum. Like what do you think is going to happen? And then we get down there and we're like, how do I step over him in a way that says to him, don't swipe at me?
I see you. This is not an attack, like by surprise.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we were taking questions from you, and we had some submitted in advance. And then so I was actually going to just sort of throw it out there and see where we go with this. It's a series of questions. And it has to do with sort of the incredibly light subject of sin and death and resurrection and all those sort of things. And so the question comes like this. It's from one of our church attenders. It says, Christ's resurrection shows us that there's life after death. How did his death take away our sins when sins still exist? Which is a really profound question, because, if Christ's death took away sins, why are we still sinning? Any thoughts on that one?
Huh. I mean, it's such a light question, like you said, for
Yeah.
noon on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
But my mind immediately goes to a free will kind of conversation. I don't know about you with that we have the ability to make choices for ourselves. I don't know. That would be my, like, one attempt at that right now.
Yeah. I think a lot of it to me comes down, and this, I'm sorry if this gets a little too wild, but a lot of it comes down to like our understanding of time. If God's existence is one that exists outside of time,
Mhm.
and we are beings that by nature of our mortality are stuck in the construct of time. Um, I think there's a sense in my mind, the way I've made sense of it is that, upon the return of Christ, upon the hereafter becoming the now, we will be drawn into that timeless existence, and in that existence, the sin is wiped away by that, and so I don't know, and I guess I would make that answer in combination of what you said, of free will, because there is that cycle as human beings we go through, that we're, Christ is perpetually offering forgiveness as we are perpetually asking for it. And um I don't know, I think that's why that the idea of my mind just went blank. What's the Catholic theology of where you have to make a purgatory? I think
Mm,
that's where the idea of purgatory gets so interesting for people, because it's hard to imagine me going from who I am now to an eternal existence where I just get it and I'm not jealous when we're playing heaven baseball and someone hits a home run off of me, that I don't sin and want to bean this person the next time. Uh, I think that's a complicated question, which is why the idea of, like, do you have this period of time where there's a reckoning?
mhm.
uh Yep. Gail, I think Gail is watching us. We can see the chats. You got any questions? That's how we're taking questions. If you want to throw a chat in there on YouTube or Facebook, we'll do our best to answer that question and interact here. So it's great to see those who are watching with us live. We also have some other questions. So another follow up to that is, why does God allow the devil to still roam free? And sort of thought is that, like, is that a way of testing, God's way of testing, which is it's a complicated question, because it gets down to what is one's belief in devil, demonic testing,
Mhm.
sort of things like that. So curious if you wanted to give that one a shot.
I don't. That's the beauty of being live. And
Yeah.
back to Shane.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that's a hard one. To me, I kind of put my answer a little bit in the question. It comes
Mhm,
down to, what does one see the devil as being? So stay with me on this one. I'll try to keep this as concise as possible.
mhm,
Hasatan, the word we use for Satan,
mhm,
was often used in other cultures, specifically Persia, as someone who played the role of an adversary on behalf of a king. In some situations, they would be effectively like a spy that would go in to try to determine a person's true intentions. That's the way to say it. Someone's true intention. So if someone came into court and said, I believe in the king, but in their private life were saying things against the king, the Hasatan would be able to be in that private life and expose that. Also, in more specific legal settings, a Hasatan would be, someone who is doing, sort of a counter against a witness. It's the person that would challenge them and ask this question. So the word we even have for Satan, which I'm using here in synonymous with devil, although it's certainly not uniform in scripture. That's sort of the complicated origin of some of that word. I'm by no means a Greek scholar. or a total be all expert on this. So I apologize if I've screwed something up with that, or I'm leaving something big out. So, um, devil, Satan, that's really complicated, because you also have an incident, the most famous one, where, you know, Jesus literally calling Peter Satan,
Mhm.
or saying to other, folks, being a Satan. And so I don't know, is Satan, the devil, an actual being, or is it a metaphor for our human failings? I don't know about you. I feel like I'm perfectly capable of generating a whole host of temptations quite on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the story from the Gospels that kind of comes to mind is Jesus being tested in the wilderness, right? So he's baptized, and then the Holy Spirit leads him out into the wilderness, and it is this kind of testing of what these temptations are, for him and for us too. So there is kind of that dynamic of testing going on there, but really in the way that you're talking about, that kind of adversarial role.
Yeah, I don't know. It's challenging. I don't have a great understanding of that notion of testing, because I think most of us don't really know what to do with that. The idea that God would use some experience as a testing, because then that opens the door to just saying, is God a cruel God?
Mhm,
Because I guarantee you there's a lot of really bad theologians right now trying to say that this is God testing us.
mhm,
And I would say there's a really big difference between saying God intentionally caused something like this in order to test us, and saying this is an incident that happened that is of no making of God, that God is willing to use, or I would better say this, partner with us in order to make it a growth experience. One of my very, very favorite musicians is a guy named David Bazan, and he was in a group years ago called Pedro the Lion, who started out as sort of like Christianity adjacent, became really, I don't know, kind of the hipster band of 10, 15 years ago. And um, writes really thought-provoking, interesting music, often very melancholy. But he was saying on Twitter this morning that he had felt like he'd had more personal growth in the last 2 or 3 months, because it's the most he's been home in 15 years, to just sort of be alone with his own thoughts and things like that. And I think that's super interesting to think about. To me, I would say, if someone were saying something like that within a religious context, we would very quickly say, like, "Oh, that's God working right there."
mhm, but not God testing, right?
Yeah,
Like, so not, "Well, so what are you doing with this time? Are you
yeah,
being spiritually like, no."
yeah, yeah. That's a really challenging question, and I don't know. There's a stream of theology you and I have talked about before, Amy, and I tend to like. It's just called process theology, and it's this idea that God is always still working.
Mhm,
In some ways, it's like the opposite of the detached God of deism, a God that's far away, just observing. This is the idea that God is down in the mess and the muck with us. The difference is, process theology is not really big into talking about the superpowers of God to fix everything and control everything. It's about
mhm.
the partner God that still maintains those powers, but maybe advocates them for the sake of relationship. I don't know. There's probably better words to describe it than that, but yeah.
Well, and that makes me think of the scripture from Sunday too, the road to Emmaus and the risen Christ walking along, on this journey with us, right beside us.
So we've had some people ask us about what about people in this time. So many people's lives are slowing down, but there are also people whose lives in this are actually speeding up, and that could be for a variety of reasons. I would say there are elements of my life, I don't know how you feel, there are elements of my life that have sped up,
Mhm,
and it's because we're doing church in a different way, and that different way of doing things can be quite labor intensive. um, so that's sped up, but there's also people whose personal lives and professional lives have both sped up. I've talked to some people recently who their employers feel like, because they're working at home, they can do more now, even though they're stuck with kids, and but there's also people whose lives are speeding up because college kids are moving back home.
mhm,
um, their life is just busier with that. Maybe they got a high motor and always need to be doing something. Um, so I'm just curious, any advice on that or any thoughts about how to manage a life that is speeding up as a result of COVID-19?
Well, so I'm reminded of Dr. Beth Baxter, our conversation with her from last week, and that idea that this is not a time that any of us are multitasking
Hmm.
anything, right? So in the midst of this kind of pull of, for some people, everything speeding up and being very different, to take one thing at a time would be my advice. That you
Yeah.
because we are in a time of disillusionment and grief in a lot of ways, and particularly during those moments, this is not the time to, even if you have 5 things on your plate, I don't think anyone right now can think about all 5 of those things at one time. So, thinking about what is the next thing that's right in front of me? What is the next small step that I can take? And maybe that might be able to have that effect of slowing down a little bit. I don't know. It's really hard.
Yeah. And I mean, this would be a luxury of security, but and if we were able to do as you described, it might easily make us prioritize what we want to be doing
Mhm.
as opposed to what we have to be doing. I know on a personal level, that's been a little bit of that's been a struggle here for us because um, the way we put our services together, like I said earlier, is quite labor intensive, and it tends to fall sort of in the latter half of a week. And so to use that model you're just talking about, analyzing from that, I realize like there's certain things I can't be filming myself preaching and parenting at the same time.
Mhm.
So some of those challenges are, that puts that into pretty stark contrast for me because I'm like, man, I don't want to spend 12 hours this Saturday doing this. And so it's, it's us working hard to try to do that quicker. And, I realize that I've never been a good multitasker. So this world right now is not that different from me.
Mhm. Well, and I think there's a lot of evidence that really none of us are are good
Yeah.
multitaskers
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
any point, even outside of what we're walking through together right now, that our minds just don't work best that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd read some productivity experts that were talking about that sort of thing, and they were talking about our there's a work called, I'm going to forget his name, but the book is called Deep Work, and he's the guy, I could tell you all about him, and I literally forget his name. Deep Work, and it's a guy that works at MIT, and he's just talking about productivity, and so many of our jobs are head jobs, particularly if you're someone who can work at home now. It's sort of, it's demonstrated this for you that like you're employed because of what your brain is able to do. And um but there's so much of our job through multitasking and stuff that really has nothing to do with that actual productivity that we just get stuck doing. And so, if you're paid to analyze something and come up with advice or create communications connections, all this other stuff we're doing is just multitasking our ability to like focus ourselves on that really deep task. And that was sort of his argument for companies and individuals, is try to orient your life in a way that you can put your mental resources to the things that you want to put them to, which, this is a great opportunity to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, if you got questions, throw them there in the comments or the chat. You can also always email us at questions@hpcnashville.org. Um, yeah, we got our deep dive live coming up tomorrow night, which we're excited about. We'll be interviewing Aaron Montz, who is a church planting pastor in the Seattle, Washington area. And we'll hope to hear a little bit about their story and what they're experiencing, what they see God doing in their communities. So we're excited about that. Aaron is married to one of my lifelong friends. I've known Aaron Ice for years, and his wife Tracy for literally my entire life. And I've seen them in a lot of different situations. He's a wonderful guy, and I think you will love his conversation. I also want to commend to you last week's, as Amy had talked about, our interview with Dr. Beth Baxter, who talked about caring for yourself, just your mental health in this, and just had a lot of wonderful advice. That's still available both on YouTube and Facebook, the archive version of that. because we know a lot of people found that incredibly beneficial. It's one of those things that if you got a bunch of friends, everyone's thinking about this stuff, just share it with them. I think they would really appreciate that. We'll check in back with you on Thursday, and then we got Sunday on our Sunday worship services at 10:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. We are streaming all over the place. Yep. Any other thoughts, big plans for the day? I got to make my daughter's lunch here in a few minutes, which is a
Yeah.
big deal.
That's what I'm about to do as well. And we've put a little, I put a little bit of kind of washout purple in her hair, so that's kind of sitting and working right now. So we'll see how that turns out.
Nice. I'm interested. See how that is. I tried to dye my hair green once, but I soon realized that when your hair is already like a darker brown, the green doesn't really show. So people would be like, "I see a little green in your hair," and I was like, "Yeah, it was meant to be really green."
You have to bleach it first. I mean, it's an
Oh,
option.
yeah. I once in my life bleached my hair black because I thought I would like my hair black, or not bleach, dyed it
Yeah.
black. Hated it. A day later, bleached it blonde.
Oh.
And my scalp felt like somebody just had like cinched it up. It was so tight, and my hair turned orange with brown tips. It was amazing and hideous at the same time. Things you do in college when you are responsible to no one except for
I
yourself.
think we need photos.
Yeah, I'm sure they exist somewhere. And me wearing like a punk rock necklace and I don't know, painted fingernails. It exists somewhere. My sister yesterday found a old tape recording from her and I on a karaoke machine where I am this is so embarrassing. I am singing religious lyrics over Blind Melon's No Rain. It's it's terrible. And then I'm conducting an interview with her about her, I believe, 9-year-old dating life. So it's some quality content that this family is discovering during this time. So that will not ever make the air except on our family's Snapchat.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful day. Whether if you joined us live or not, doesn't matter. Still do some comments, ask us questions, send us questions on that questions at HPC Nashville. You can even put them there in the comments of this, and we'll check them and try to make sure and address them at later dates. They can be just normal day-to-day questions about the church. But if you're not someone who's immediately involved in our community, or even here in Nashville, we're still answering questions because we realize from our live streaming that we have people all over the states and all over the world participating in worship with us. So make sure you ask us those questions. We'll do our best to answer them. Things about previous sermons, just nagging spiritual questions that you've never had answered, questions about the best type of potato chip. We'll share an opinion, maybe not the authoritative answer.
Maybe
So
that.
maybe though, who knows? Who knows? There is a guy on YouTube who has a YouTube channel where all he does is review fast food, and he does it with utter seriousness. It's amazing. It's seriousness, but he knows what's going on. Like he knows that people are watching this with the sense of irony. It's wonderful. I think if I were to have a YouTube show, that would be about as close to what I would have because I love it. Love it. So
I will be checking that out.
yeah. All right, y'all. Thanks for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we're going to somehow try and stop this.
Mhm.
I think I'm going to hit the stop button. That'll probably do it. Take care. We will be better next time. All right.